You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Sports fans, welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. At the end of this show, you're going to get the interview that I did with Ed Gruver, the author of The Ice Bowl. Kind of interesting. David Kaiser interview on Friday, 65 Packers. Ed Gruver interview, 67 Packers. I did not do that on purpose. That was a sheer coincidence. But I am going to start with the NFL. A lot of games to get to. I'll start with probably the biggest upset of yesterday. It's either this or Panthers-Cardinals. Take your pick. Of course, I'm talking about the Washington football team beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 29-19. Washington's defense this year has been dreadful. Everyone expected it to carry this team into the playoff picture. I mean, there were some people picking Washington to win the NFC East over the Cowboys. But Washington's defense has been really bad this year. It's one of the biggest surprises of the NFL season. Their rushing defense has been great, but everything else has been god-awful. I don't know anyone outside of the DC area that was picking Washington to win this game. But Washington's defense stepped up, intercepted Brady on his second and third drives of the game. They got 10 points off those picks. If you blinked, Washington was up 13-0. Give them a ton of credit. They did a great job of limiting Mike Evans. Evans only had 2 catches. Yes, he had a touchdown catch, but for a guy like Evans to only have 2 catches shows how great Washington's defensive game plan was. I mean, you don't want Leonard Fournette leading the Buccaneers in catches in a game. All due respect to Leonard Fournette, I like Fournette. You don't want him having more catches than Evans and Chris Godwin. You don't want Godwin only having 7 catches for 57 yards. You don't want Fournette having 8 catches for 45 yards. This was a terrible offensive game by the Buccaneers. Taylor Heineke stepped up, had a really good game. He's shown an ability to play Brady tough. Like, everyone forgets this. Taylor Heineke came incredibly close to beating the Buccaneers in the wild card round last year. If Washington had won that game, the Packers are probably in the Super Bowl. Who wins a Chiefs-Packers Super Bowl? You think about the 4 quarterbacks that Brady faced last year in the playoffs. Drew Brees, future Hall of Famer. Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer. Patrick Mahomes, probably a future Hall of Famer. Taylor Heineke, the only way he's getting into Canton is if he's buying a ticket. But who played Brady the closest? Taylor Heineke. And Heineke showed yesterday that that wasn't a fluke. He made really smart decisions, completed 26 of his 32 passes for 256 yards and a touchdown. I understand that he was sacked 5 times. Washington's O-line was not good, except on the goal line. They were able to get a little bit of a push for Antonio Gibson. But all in all, Gibson didn't have a good game. 24 carries for 64 yards? Yes, 2 touchdowns. That's impressive. But that's a 2.7 yards per carry. That's not good. Terry McLaurin, 6 catches for 59 yards. That's not good. But Washington stepped up when they needed to. McLaurin stepped up when he needed to. Gibson stepped up when he needed to. Their final drive was insane. 19 plays, taking over 10 minutes, finishing it off with a touchdown, icing the game. Absolutely incredible. I mean, think about it. Brady had just thrown the touchdown to Evans. It's 23-19 Washington at this point. 10 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock. That's plenty of time. But what did Washington do? They sat on the football and drove 80 yards down the field. They had 6 first downs on that drive alone. What were the big moments there? 3rd and 1 at the Buccaneers 33. If the Buccaneers can stop them from converting 3rd down, let's say Joey Sly hits the long field goal. Because Sly's not a bad kicker. Not the greatest kicker in the world, but not bad. Let's say he kicks the field goal. That makes it 26-19. That's still a 1-score game. If you go for it on 4th down and miss, you're giving the Buccaneers decent field position at their own 33-yard line. You're giving Brady time to drive down the field. They needed to get a 1st down there, and they got it. Great job by Antonio Gibson. Great job by Taylor Heineke to find Adam Humphries for his only catch of the game on 3rd and 4. No one thought that ball was going to Humphries. Heineke found him. He got 5 yards. Humphries stuck it to his former team a little bit. 3rd and 5. Terry McLaurin coming up big. Again, if Washington doesn't convert, they're kicking a field goal, and it's a 1-score game. Brady doesn't have a ton of time, about 3 minutes, but I've seen Tom Brady convert 3-minute drills before. Then Antonio Gibson plows it into the end zone, takes a lot of time off the clock in the process, ices the game for Washington. This is a huge upset. The Buccaneers had a big opportunity to put a little bit of space between them and the Saints because the Saints lost yesterday, but they couldn't do it. This was a really tough loss for the Buccaneers. Moving on now to Lions-Steelers. The only reason that I want to talk about this game is Ben Roethlisberger not playing. You want me to give the Lions credit for forcing the tie? I'm not going to do that. It is impossible for me to give a team credit when their quarterback only completes 14 passes for 114 yards. It is impossible for me to give a team credit when only 5 different players catch passes. Oh, hallelujah, they're not going to go 0-17. What's the difference between going 0-17 and going 0-16-1? You know what the one good thing about this season is, as a Jets fan? Last year, they were the worst team in the NFL. I don't care that the Jaguars had a worse record. The Jets were worse than the Jaguars. The Jets are not the worst team in the NFL this year. You know who's worse than them? The Detroit Lions. The Texans too, but I'm talking about the Lions. The only reason that I'm bringing up this game is because Ben Roethlisberger was out with the coronavirus. Now, he is vaccinated, so he should be back for Sunday Night Football against the Chargers. What's important to note is how we found out that he has the coronavirus. He self-reported symptoms. He said to the Steelers, hey, I'm feeling this, that, and the other. He took a COVID test, and it came back positive. I mean, Roethlisberger very easily could have said nothing. Oh, I'm vaccinated, I'll be okay. My teammates will be okay. The Lions will be okay. Nothing's going to happen. But no, he did the responsible thing and self-reported symptoms. How serious were the symptoms? We'll never know for sure. Again, getting vaccinated against the coronavirus doesn't stop you from getting it. It just stops you from getting it really badly. It should stop you from going to the hospital because of it. It should stop you from buying the ranch. But you can still get the coronavirus. You can still feel something. And Roethlisberger felt something. And he did the responsible thing by self-reporting symptoms. Honestly, we need to applaud Roethlisberger for that. Because if it came out that he played with the coronavirus and he wasn't feeling well on Saturday, that's Armageddon. You're endangering the Steelers, you're endangering the Lions, you're putting Sunday Night Football in jeopardy, you're putting the Lions game against the Browns in jeopardy. I commend Ben Roethlisberger for being honest. He's an honest guy. I remember a game in 2015 where he got his bell rung and He said, hey, I don't think I can go. And people applauded him for it. Like, yeah, don't endanger yourself anymore. We'll go to the backup. It's fine. There was a point in time where we would have vilified Roethlisberger for that. Oh, you're the quarterback. You've got to play through everything. Suck it up. Be a man. Now, we're realizing that health is important. Should we have recognized that a lot sooner? Yeah, probably. But I guess better late than never. The point is, I commend Ben Roethlisberger for his honesty. I don't commend the Lions or Steelers for their play. They both played like garbage. Mason Rudolph made some really bad throws. There were really bad snaps. The Lions' passing game looked inept. It was like watching a Jets game. Except instead of the Jets playing a good team, the Jets were playing the Jets. Moving on now to Browns-Patriots. And I've got to be fair. I have been incredibly critical of Mac Jones. Anything you can imagine me saying about Mac Jones, I've said about him. But I've got to be fair. He looked excellent against the Browns. The guy only had 4 incompletions. He threw 3 touchdowns. Yes, less than 200 yards. Yes, it was dink and dunk, but it worked. The Patriots scored 45 points. Don't look now, but the Patriots actually have the second wildcard spot in the AFC. They're only a half game behind the Bills for the AFC East title. The Patriots looked dead to the world not that long ago. They were 2-4. Even when they were 3-4, I wasn't taking them seriously. Who were the 2 teams that they beat? The Jets twice and the Texans. I can't read anything into that. But they beat the Chargers in a really close game. They destroyed the Panthers. Yeah, the Patriots own Sam Darnold. We know that. Then they destroyed the Browns? A good Browns team? Ramondre Stevenson has 20 carries for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns? This was a rout. This was a joke. We had a lot of those yesterday. Bills, Jets, Cowboys, Falcons, Patriots, Browns, and Chiefs, Raiders. Panthers, Cardinals, too, was a rout. Packers, Seahawks, maybe. Eagles, Broncos, maybe. Weird week. Very weird week in the NFL. And nothing personifies that more than Panthers, Cardinals. Sometimes I just wonder why I even do NFL picks. I mean, yeah, I got Saints, Titans wrong. I was really close to getting that right, though. In all fairness. I said Titans minus 3.5. They won by 2. Alright, I was really close. I'm not beating myself up over that. Jaguars, Colts. I said the Jaguars would cover. I was right. Rams, Niners. We don't know. But I really think the Rams are going to win by at least a touchdown. Who on earth would have picked the Panthers to win this game? Who would have picked them to even cover a 7-point spread? The Cardinals winning by a touchdown? Yeah, I could see that. They're going up against a backup quarterback, and not a particularly good one either. Like, I understand that they started Colt McCoy, and there was no DeAndre Hopkins. I totally get that. But you still had to feel good about the Cardinals' chances. Like, last week, the Cardinals destroyed the Niners 31-17. That game was more of a rout than the score would lead you to believe. They were up 31-7 at one point. So I don't want to hear any excuses. The Cardinals should have won this game. They should have won it easily. In Arizona? Against a bad Panthers team? Come on. Instead, they look absolutely dead to the world. I praised Cliff Kingsbury last week, even though I really don't like him. Should I just pile on now and say I was wrong? That was a fluke. Kingsbury's dreadful. He only looks good because of Kyler Murray. He only looks good because of DeAndre Hopkins. Was the Niners game just a fluke? I mean, the Niners aren't good. It's tough. And give Cam Newton a ton of credit for coming in and scoring 2 touchdowns, 1 passing, 1 running, saying to the camera that he's back, he's happy to be playing football. Of course, Christian McCaffrey did Christian McCaffrey things, because when healthy, he's probably the best non-quarterback in the NFL. This game was an absolute joke. It was over in the first quarter. The Panthers were up 17-0. They were up 23-0 at the half. I'm sure Cardinals fans were leaving after 3 quarters. I certainly would have left early if I was a Cardinals fan. And now Cam Newton gets to start next week against Washington. So it's kind of funny. The 2 teams that pulled off the biggest upsets last week are going to go at it the following week. And that game is going to be in Carolina. Washington doesn't have a great defense. I understand what they did to the Buccaneers, okay? But overall, they don't have a great defense. Newton should go off in that game. Like, I could really see him putting together a really motivated performance. See what happens when Sam Darnold isn't playing? You beat a great Cardinals team. No way Darnold starts next year under center for the Panthers. Maybe he'll be the backup, but nothing more. Moving on now to Seahawks Packers. A game that you got really excited about. Russell Wilson versus Aaron Rodgers. 2 Hall of Famers going at it. Wilson back from the finger injury. Rodgers back from COVID protocol. But this game is absolutely dreadful. 17-0. The Seahawks looked absolutely dead to the world. That is the worst game I have ever seen Russell Wilson play. Is it possible that he wasn't 100% recovered from the finger injury? Is it possible that he was rusty? Yes and yes, but to get shut out? That's inexcusable. I mean, I understand that the Packers have a really good defense, but to complete just 50% of your passes and throw 2 interceptions? I mean, that's a joke. The Packers defense did a great job of taking away DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. They combined for just 5 catches for 49 yards. You remember how bad the Broncos looked in Super Bowl 48 against the Seahawks? at MetLife Stadium. That's about as bad as the Seahawks looked yesterday. Now, Aaron Rodgers wasn't much better. I mean, the score was 3-0 headed into the fourth quarter. The Packers really weren't getting much going offensively. Rodgers had the killer red zone interception. The first red zone interception he's ever thrown at Lambeau Field. And it's kind of funny. You know who picked it off? Jamal Adams. That's actually Adams' first pick of the season. It's his first interception as a Seahawk. Alright, it took him a season and a half, but he finally has an interception. Better late than never, right? I mean, it did come at a big moment. It's not his fault that the Seahawks offense was inept. I mean, I've seen Rodgers look better than this. I don't want to say that this is the after effects of COVID manifesting itself. It's tempting to say that, but I have no proof. It'll be interesting to see what the Packers do against the Vikings next week. No Aaron Jones. And the game is going to be at US Bank Stadium. It's not impossible to think that the Vikings can win that game. But I'll say this. The Seahawks are in trouble. Their path to making the playoffs was to tread water until Wilson came back and then go on a big winning streak. The Seahawks did not do that. They only won one of the games that Geno Smith played in. It was against the Jaguars. Really tough for me to read anything into that. Then after their bye week, they get creamed. They get shut out. They're playing the Cardinals next week. They're going to lose that game. I mean, they're 3-6 now. They're probably going to fall to 3-7 after next week. What, do you expect them to run the table and go 10-7? That's not going to happen. The Seahawks' playoff dreams are probably over. They really had to win this game, and they didn't. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And I'll start with Oklahoma-Baylor, a game that I nailed. I said Baylor would win this game. I was 100% right. I didn't think it would be the domination that it was. Don't let the score fool you. Baylor was the better team in this game from the outset. But hey, I got it right, so good job, Jacob. Baylor's running game was the key to this game. The guys who you really wanted to step up, guys like Perrion Winfrey, Jalen Redmond, Nick Benito, Isaiah Thomas, guys like that, they all got ran over. They couldn't tackle to save their lives. I mean, give Brian Asamoah credit, but he was trying to do everything out there. That's not going to work. Baylor just ran roughshod over Oklahoma. Abram Smith had 20 carries for 148 yards. Jerry Bohannon had 9 carries for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Baylor just dominated Oklahoma on the ground. And Oklahoma switched quarterbacks again. Caleb Williams looked dreadful. Completed just 10 of his 19 passes. He threw 2 interceptions. Spencer Rattler came in and completed 4 of his 6 passes for 36 yards. So who's going to start next week against Iowa State? Williams or Rattler? You'd think it would be Williams, because Rattler really didn't set the world on fire. But if you benched Williams, how do you put him back out there? Now we don't need to look at Oklahoma as a true CFP threat, which is good because according to the eye test, they really weren't a CFP threat. You want to tell me Baylor's in the mix now? They need a lot of things to go right. The reality is all Baylor's win did was knock Oklahoma out of the picture, which is good because I was never crazy about Oklahoma. But it really seems like it's a 5-team race. Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, OSU, and Cincinnati. And you know that Georgia's going to play Alabama in the SEC title game. If Georgia wins that game, the committee's going to have a very tough choice to make. Do they put a 2-loss Bama team in over, let's say, an undefeated Cincinnati? Or a 1-loss Notre Dame? Or a 1-loss Oklahoma State? Very tough. But it's good to see Oklahoma out of the CFP picture. I hated that I was putting them in. The eye test told me that they never deserved it. Moving on now to Purdue versus OSU. An absolute rout by the Buckeyes. This was an absolute track meet. Neither defense could do anything. I mean, you've got C.J. Stroud going off, completing 31 of his 38 passes for 361 yards and 5 touchdowns. Mayan Williams had 14 carries for 117 yards. Travion Henderson had 13 carries for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3 different Buckeyes receivers had a touchdown. Jackson Smith and Jigba had 9 catches for 139 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson had the game of his life. 10 catches for 126 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chris Olave had 9 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. Like I said, this was a track meet. But not to be outdone, Aiden O'Connell was really good. He completed 40 of his 52 passes for 390 yards and 4 touchdowns. He really wasn't much worse than Stroud. The main difference was Purdue's lack of a running game. King Doru was really inept. He had 10 carries for just 26 yards. It's tough to win when you only have 91 rushing yards as a team. At the end of the day, this was a track meet. Give OSU credit for winning. This game was an absolute joke. I didn't like that my ABC affiliate cut in midway to tell me about tornadoes that weren't in my area. There were tornadoes on Long Island on Saturday, but none in my area. Maybe I'm being selfish. I just didn't like missing some of the game for that. But give OSU all the credit in the world for knocking off a really good Purdue team. A Purdue team that played spoiler to Iowa and Michigan State recently. They were the spoiler makers, not the boiler makers. The spoiler makers. I did not come up with that, for whatever it's worth. Give the Buckeyes credit. they are a force to be reckoned with. Moving on now to Texas A&M versus Ole Miss. And what did I tell you I'd be looking at with this game? Would Matt Corral be able to slice and dice this great Aggies defense? The answer? Not great, but not bad. He completed 24 of 37 passes for 247 yards and a touchdown. Alright, that's a good performance. I'm not saying it's a bad performance. It's just not great. Like, in a perfect world, Corral would have done more. In a perfect world, he would have been the best Rebel on Saturday, not Jerry and Ely, who had 24 carries for 152 yards. It's kind of funny. Ely had the same number of carries as Corral had completions. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. Realistically, this win was more because of Ole Miss's defense. They frustrated Zach Calzada into making short passes and throwing 2 interceptions, one of which got returned to the house. That was really the dagger in the heart of the Aggies. I mean, Devon Achane was great. He had 12 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Calzada wasn't. I mean, give the Ole Miss defense credit for making him work. Guys like Sam Williams, A.J. Finley, Ashanti Sistrunk, Dean Leonard, Kadron Smith, DeAndre Prince, Cedric Johnson, and Katie Hill all played really, really well. I mean, I'll give Corral credit for this. There was no Aggies defender that really wowed me. Maybe DeMarvin Leal. Maybe Edgar and Cooper. Maybe Antonio Johnson. Maybe Aaron Hansford, if I'm being really generous. But I wouldn't say that any of those guys knocked my socks off. Did this game hurt Corral's draft stock? The answer is no. But did it make him the clear-cut number 1? No, I still think there's a battle between him and Kenny Pickett. Moving on now to NC State versus Wake Forest. What did I tell you about this being the game of the week? Believe it or not, I actually know a little bit about sports. This was a back and forth affair. It was another track meet. NC State tried to win with their passing game. Wake Forest tried to win with their running game. Ultimately, it was Wake Forest that won out. Justice Ellison and Sam Hartman were decent on the ground. I'm going to make a prediction about Hartman. Someone's going to draft him late, like in day 3. And they're going to try to turn him into a Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts type. It's not impossible that that could turn into something, but I think it's highly unlikely. But this was a big win for Wake Forest. They had their CFP hopes dashed after getting upset by UNC. To rebound and knock off a good NC State team is really impressive. Wake Forest isn't a bad team by any stretch. They're not great, but they're solid. They are being underrated. This is a good win for the Demon Deacons. I do like them. This was the game of the week. Make no mistake about it. Back and forth affair. NC State had their opportunities. But ultimately, Wake Forest pulled it out in the end. Give them credit for winning that type of a game. I do like them. There was one other game that I wanted to talk about. It was Mississippi State versus Auburn. I saw a lot of people getting on the Tigers offense for this loss. Don't get on the Tigers offense. Don't get on Bo Nix. Don't get on Tank Bigsby, even though he really wasn't that good. The Tigers offense is not the seminal reason that they lost this game. The seminal reason that the Tigers lost was their abhorrent defense. You cannot allow Will Rodgers to throw 6 touchdowns. You cannot allow him to complete 80% of his passes for 415 yards. Auburn was up in this game 28-10 at the half. They then got outscored 33-6. At the end of the day, the Auburn offense did their job. They put up 34 points. For that defense to give up 33 second half points is inexcusable. That is why Auburn lost. All due respect to Will Rodgers, he's not a bad quarterback, but you can't have him go off like that. He's not that type of a quarterback. He's good, he's not great. He looked like the second coming of Dak Prescott on Saturday. That's not going to work for me. Dreadful job by the Auburn defense. And now Bo Nix is out for the year. This is going to be a big free fall for Auburn. They already got their 6th win, so they're going to a bowl game, but it's not going to be a good one, and they're going to lose it. I don't care who they're going up against. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And I'll start with a small story, then I'll go to the big one. The small story is Jhoulys Chacin re-signing with the Rockies on a 1-year deal worth $1.25 million. And this is a good move for the Rockies. Some pitchers just pitch better when they're Rockies. It's weird. There is no logical explanation for it. But you think about a guy like Ubaldo Jimenez, how bad he was with the Orioles. And the Indians, too. How about a guy like Jorge De La Rosa, who started with the Brewers and the Royals? He was dreadful. With the Rockies, those guys were great. Jimenez was an all-star. Chacin really struggled outside of Colorado. He was bad for the Brewers in 2019, did nothing with the Red Sox, did nothing with the Braves. He goes back to the Rockies and is solid. He went 3-2 with a 4.34 ERA. I'll take that. Chacin's not a bad pitcher. Not great, but certainly not bad. I mean, you're bringing back a guy who the fans like, who they know, who they saw when he was really young, and you've got to keep that fan base energized. It's very easy to not pay attention to them because they're so bad. So bringing back a guy like Chacin is a good way to keep them entertained. I like this move for the Rockies. It makes a lot of sense. Alright, now the big story. Eduardo Rodriguez signing with the Tigers on a 5-year deal worth $77 million. It can max out at $80 million with incentives. Rodriguez can opt out of the deal after 2 seasons. And firstly, let me say that I'm really happy for Eduardo Rodriguez. Alright, here's a guy who didn't pitch at all in 2020 because he had the coronavirus and developed myocarditis. And it was serious. Like, the guy almost died from it. He comes back in 2021, pitches a full season, starts 31 games, starts playoff games, and now he gets a big contract from the Tigers. I'm happy for him. Having said that, this is a big overpay. These freaking lefties. I don't know what it is, but are there so few decent lefties in the bigs that a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez gets over $15 million a year? I mean, he wasn't great last year. He went 13-8, which I like. But he had a 4.74 ERA. He struck out 185 guys. Okay, that's impressive. But his whip really wasn't. 1.39. I understand that he's young. He's 28. Over $15 million a year, though, I can't endorse that. 5 years is a little too much, but again, he's 28. I'm not going to go crazy about that. I would have preferred 3, maybe 4. 5 is pushing it. Realistically, the highest I would have gone for him is $10 million per year for 4 years. Maybe I could have been convinced to go 11, maybe 12. If I was really desperate. 15, I can't do that. I mean, a lot of people around baseball were really impressed with the Tigers. They were better than a lot of people expected them to be. They weren't great by any stretch, but they did go 77-85. That's the most wins they've had in a season since 2016. They took a big step in the right direction. Their future's bright. Like, I know a lot of people around baseball were gonna pick the Tigers as like a sleeper team next year. A team that maybe, just maybe, could sneak into the playoffs. Or at the very least, be in the playoff picture. This signing is going to cause some people to double down on that notion. I just don't see it. I'd go the other way with it. I understand that the Tigers' pitching isn't great. Casey Mize looks like he's going to be really good. I like Tarek Skubal. But once you get past him, it gets a little dicey. Jose Urena had a dreadful season. He went 4-8 with a 5.81 ERA. Willie Peralta's a free agent. Matt Manning in his rookie year did absolutely nothing. He went 4-7 with a 5.8 ERA. I understand that he was a very highly thought of prospect. I'm not giving up on him, but he didn't have a good rookie year. And Matthew Boyd has been overrated his whole career. He went 3-8. I don't care that he had a 3.89 ERA. The guy only started 15 games, and he went 3-8. For a long time, this guy's been talked about as a big trade candidate. Thank God that no team has traded for Matt Boyd. He's not good. So look, does Erod represent an upgrade over Urania, Manning, and Boyd? The answer is yes. In fact, he probably represents an upgrade over Peralta too. But if you're going to spend big in free agency, and I don't begrudge the Tigers for spending big by any stretch, set your sights a little higher. Go after a guy like Scherzer. Go after a guy like Kershaw. A top 3 of Mize, Skubal, and Erod doesn't inspire a ton of confidence in me. It's not dreadful, but it's not great. Like, Erod's not a bad pitcher, he's just not great. He's being overpaid. I'm happy for him that he got a big contract. He just got overpaid. And you round that rotation out with Manning and Boyd? Maybe Manning will take a step forward. Maybe Boyd will continue his upward trajectory. I'm just skeptical. I'm not in love with this move by any stretch for the Tigers. I understand wanting to strike while the iron is hot. The Tigers took a step forward last year, so they're going to try to take another step forward. But there was a better way to do that than to give Eduardo Rodriguez over $15 million a year. I'll close this show out by eulogizing a couple athletes that really deserve to be eulogized. Again, the big one will come last because he'll overshadow the smaller one. The first one to talk about is Julio Lugo, who died today, 1 day shy of his 46th birthday from a heart attack. We didn't hear of any health troubles surrounding Lugo. So for a seemingly healthy 45-year-old man, soon to be 46, to die of a heart attack is stunning to say the least. Julio Lugo was a good baseball player. Really good infielder, could play the outfield if you wanted him to. He was a guy who'd hit in the neighborhood of 270, hit low double-digit home runs, and would have speed to burn. I mean, this guy was a really solid player. Would it be nice to have 9 All-Stars in your starting lineup? The answer is yes, but that's never going to happen. You need guys who just go out there and do their job every day. Maybe not the flashiest guys in the world, but role players. That was Julio Lugo. Every team this guy played on, he played his role and he played it perfectly. With the Astros, he was really good. With the Rays, he was a perfect fit. If you'll recall, those 2000 Rays teams, they loved to run. Guys like Carl Crawford and Joey Gathright, Rocco Baldelli, B.J. Upton, those guys had speed for days. Lugo fit in perfectly. Now, he got traded to the Dodgers at the 2006 trade deadline. And yeah, he wasn't great. didn't do much in the NLDS against the Mets that year. But then he went to the Red Sox. This guy was not a bad Red Sox. Alright, he was signed to a 4-year, $36 million deal to hit leadoff. The thing is, though, Julio Lugo was never going to be a great leadoff hitter. That wasn't when he was at his best. He was at his best when he was hitting second, or even at the bottom of the lineup. I mean, Lugo was misused. But in the 2007 World Series, he was great. He was really good against the Angels, took a step back against the Indians, then against the Rockies. He was incredible. He hit .385. He had a .500 on base percentage. If it wasn't for Mike Lowell's incredible performance, where he hit .400, Julio Lugo very easily could have been World Series MVP. That's how great he was. But that was the high watermark of his career. In 2008, he really struggled with his glove. That started the Jed Lowry era. Lugo was traded to the Cardinals at the 2009 trade deadline. Played well for the Cardinals in the NLDS against the Dodgers. He hit .400. But he didn't start. He bounced around a little bit after that. He had one last notable moment. In a 19-inning game, Lugo was dashing for home on a Scott Proctor ground ball. Pedro Alvarez charged it, threw home. Mike McHenry made a swipe tag, seemingly got Lugo, but Jerry Meals called him safe. So the Braves won. I mean, I remember that play vividly. It's not definitive that McHenry touched Lugo. The ball beat him. But can you tell me with 100% confidence that McHenry touched Lugo? I don't think you can. I didn't think that was a bad call by Jerry Meals. Certainly controversial. Certainly close. Certainly worth the argument by Clint Hurdle. But I honestly didn't have a huge problem with it. The second death is the big one. It is Sam Huff, who died on Saturday at the age of 87. Sam Huff is without question one of the greatest linebackers in NFL history. He's right up there with Brian Urlacher. He's right up there with Ray Lewis. He's right up there with Lawrence Taylor. He's right up there with Derek Brooks. Sam Huff is without question one of the greatest players in NFL history. The thing is, though, it almost never happened. Huff went to college at WVU. But no one really knew what position he should play. He played guard for the Mountaineers, but he was never going to make it as a guard in the NFL. In his first training camp, Sam Huff went to the airport. He was fully content to leave football, to leave the Giants, and he'd find another way to make a living. But Vince Lombardi literally chased him down and convinced him to come back to training camp. It was then that Tom Landry came up with the basis for the modern defense. He moved Huff off the D-line, which is where he was playing, and moved him to middle linebacker. That was the start of the 4-3 defense. He was not the first 4-3 middle linebacker. That honor goes to Ray Beck. But when Beck got hurt, Huff came in and immediately dominated. The Giants won 5 consecutive games with him starting, and in his rookie season, the Giants destroyed the Bears 47-7 in the NFL championship. In 1958, Huff's dominance really shone through. He made his first Pro Bowl. He made his first team All-Pro. He made second team All-Pro in 57. But the Giants weren't great in 57. They went 7-5. In 58, they went 9-3. They went on to play in the greatest game ever played. And in overtime, they lost to the Colts 23-17. The first ever NFL game to go into sudden death. The year after that, the Giants were back in the NFL championship game. No one remembers that. It was a rematch between the Colts and Giants. Huff had made his second straight Pro Bowl, his second straight first team All-Pro. This game was a little less of a nail-biter. It was still a nail-biter, because the Giants were up 9-7 after 3 quarters. But then in the fourth quarter, the Colts outscored the Giants 24-7. So they won back-to-back NFL championships. In 1961, the Giants made 3 straight NFL championship games in Allie Sherman's first 3 years as Giants head coach. But they didn't win any of those years. They got shut out by the Packers 37-0 in 61. They lost 16-7 to the Packers the year after. And the year after that, they lost to the Bears 14-10. For some inexplicable reason, Allie Sherman decided that Huff was the problem. For some reason, Sherman was always obsessed with remodeling the defense. He had traded Cliff Livingston after the 61 season, another really good Giants linebacker. He had traded Rosie Greer after the 62 season. Then, after the 63 season, he traded Dick Modzelewski, a really good defensive tackle for the Giants, and he traded Huff. I don't think Huff ever forgave the Giants for trading him. This guy never wanted to leave New York. He loved being a Giant. He loved the fans. And the fans loved him back. In the Redskins' first game against the Giants, which just so happened to be at Yankee Stadium, the fans serenaded him with chants of Huff, Huff, Huff. With the Redskins in 64, he made his last Pro Bowl. He made 5 in his career. even though towards the end of his career, he wasn't great, he was still really, really good. Was an excellent color commentator for the Redskins. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. He was named to the NFL 1950s All-Decade Team. He's in the Washington Ring of Fame, the Giants Ring of Honor. Every honor that this guy got, he deserved. He's one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history. May Julio Lugo and Sam Huff both rest in peace. Alright, here's my interview with Ed Gruver. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Ed Gruver, the author of The Ice Bowl. Ed, how are you?
I'm good, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, before we get into the game itself, let's give some background information to those who may not be familiar with it. What can you tell us about the 1967 Packers?
They were the last of head coach Vince Lombardi's championship teams. They also were the team that only won 9 games during the regular season. Though that's kind of a misleading record. They went 9-4-1 during a 14-game season, but they lost 2 games, one to the Rams, one to the Colts in the final seconds. And in the season finale, they played a pretty bad Pittsburgh Steelers team. And to get his players ready for the playoffs, Coach Lombardi sat a lot of his regulars, so they lost that game. So they were probably the caliber of a 12-win team during the regular season, but they only did win 9 games. But it was basically the last hurrah for the Lombardi championship teams in Green Bay. The key stars, Bart Starr, Ray Nitschke, Jerry Kramer, and the rest were getting older. So it was kind of a last stand for the team of the 60s.
Right, absolutely. At that point, the old Packers dynasty was nearing the end, and we had a new crop of players coming up. Yeah, 100%. This was really their last hurrah. On the flip side of the coin, can you lay out the 1967 Cowboys?
Yes, they were a team that was, in contrast to the Lombardi Packers, Tom Landry's Cowboys were considered a team on the rise. They very nearly beat Green Bay in the previous year's championship in the Cotton Bowl. The Packers won that game 34-27, but the Cowboys were driving at the end. The Don Meredith pass into the end zone was intercepted by Packers safety Tom Brown. And another Packers players have told me through the years that there was a collective sigh of relief on the Packers sideline because several of them felt that if the game had gone into overtime, that the momentum would be with Dallas, and there was a very good chance that the Packers might lose, and it would have been Dallas and not Green Bay representing the NFL in the first Super Bowl against the American Football League.
Yeah, no, they came close to winning that game. It was a one-score game, and the Packers pulled it out at the end and ended up destroying the Chiefs in the first Super Bowl, 100%. So how would you describe the 1967 Western Conference Championship game?
Interesting, to say the least, because the Packers and the Rams had met just a few weeks earlier in Los Angeles in the Coliseum. And as I alluded before, the Packers were leading that game late in the game, in the fourth quarter, when they suffered a blocked punt. Donnie Anderson has his punt blocked. The Rams took over deep in Green Bay territory. If memory serves, I think they were within the 10-yard line, and Roman Gabriel threw a touchdown pass very near the end of the game to stun the Packers. The Packers usually didn't lose games like that. And afterward, some of the Rams said, they had broken the Packer mystique, that, they had, basically shown the world that, the Packers weren't what they had been. They were a team on the decline, and the Packers took that talk to heart. And I know,
I was going to say,
word to the wise, don't give the Green Bay Packers bulletin board material.
Yeah, especially the Lombardi Packers. Yeah. Yeah, because Lombardi made it a point to, bring attention to those quotes the week of the playoff game, which is going to be played, interestingly enough, not at Lambeau Field, but it was going to be played at Milwaukee County Stadium. So that was an interesting factor.
Why are they playing Milwaukee as opposed to Green Bay?
They had a deal back then with Milwaukee County Stadium, and this harkens back to the threat, at least the perceived threat from the AFL, that they would put a team in Milwaukee to rival the Packers in the earlier part of the 60s, not later, because by 67 the leagues had merged. But in the formative years of the AFL, there was a threat by the AFL that they would try to, usurp some of the NFL prestige and drawing power by putting teams in, what was considered NFL locales. So Coach Lombardi moved to prevent that by signing a deal with, the brass who ran Milwaukee County Stadium, that the Packers would play X number of home games there per year.
I mean, Milwaukee isn't that far from Green Bay. It's only like a 2-hour drive, so it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. It's not. And it was a move by Lombardi to block the AFL because Lombardi really hated the AFL. I remember Max McGee saying that, if Vince could have, won the first Super Bowl, 55-10, he would have done it, But, so he didn't like the AFL because of the threat that he saw it as to the NFL. He saw it driving up salaries. And, as coach and general manager, one of his jobs was to keep salaries down, to keep it manageable, especially in a small market like Green Bay.
Right.
And when the AFL is paying people like Joe Namath, over $400,000, right out of college, I mean, that was big money back then. And, that kind of led to the eventual merger because the teams just could not, continue to support the bidding wars between the leagues. But it's getting back to the conference championship, Lombardi made it a point to say that if you allow a team like the Rams to spout off all week and talk about how they've broken your mystique and how you're not the players that used to be, and allow them to come into your backyard and beat you, well then you're going to have to take a real hard look at yourself. And the players took that speech to heart, and they really went out for that conference championship game, revved up and they played that way. They beat the Rams 28-7, and it was as one-sided as the score would indicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Packers, after being down 7-0 after one, outscored the Packers 28-0. So, the Packers really wanted to stick it to the Rams, and they certainly did. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and there was I remember I spoke with Ray Nitschke about that game. I did a biography with Ray years ago, and he told me of, late in the game when the Packers kind of had things in hand, there was a play where the Rams were on offense and they came close to a first down and the officials were marking the ball, and Nitschke ran up to the officials and said, "Don't bother to mark it, let them have the first down. We just want to stay on the field as a defense." They wanted to hit the Rams a few more times before the game was over.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Talking to Ed Gruver, the author of the Ice Bowl. So what can you tell us about the 1967 Eastern Conference Championship game?
And that was also one-sided. That was played, the Western Conference Championship game was played on Saturday, December 23rd. The Eastern Conference Championship was played a day later on Christmas Eve in the Cotton Bowl. Unlike the Western Conference game, there was the playoff in Milwaukee was cold. The weather was not ideal, at least not for a team like the Rams. But, in contrast, the weather was perfect in the Cotton Bowl for both the Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. But
I hope the Cowboys would enjoy that perfect weather.
Yeah, they certainly did enjoy it because they won. If memory serves, I think the score is 52-14, and they just ran away with it. And I remember Jerry Kramer saying that, some of the Packers had gathered at team headquarters to watch the game, and after the second score in the first quarter, Coach Lombardi stood up and said, "Well, we know who we're playing next week," and didn't even bother to watch the rest of the game. because it was pretty evident that, the Cowboys were going to win in a romp, and which they did.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Complete blowout. Packers and Cowboys by far and away the best two teams in the NFL that year, meeting in one of the most iconic games in NFL history, the Ice Bowl. Leading up to that game, were people concerned about the playing conditions?
They were, because, anytime you have a game scheduled for, the Midwest on New Year's Eve, who knows what the weather could bring. Although the last time a championship game had been played on New Year's Eve in Green Bay, it was 1961 when the Packers played the Giants. And it was cold, yes, but the field was, it was icy in some spots, but certainly manageable, even though the Packers won that game going away. It was 37-0. But, in 65 when they played the Browns on New Year's Day at Lambeau Field, it was a complete mess. Snow, sleet, freezing rain, the snow and mud. The field was a quagmire, and really suited the Green Bay ground game. And Taylor and Horning, kind of dominated, and Green Bay won 23-12. But going into the championship game against the Cowboys, when the Cowboys arrived and took the field on Saturday for their workout at Lambeau Field, they were surprised at how great a condition the field was in. They were like, if this is going to be how it's going to be tomorrow, then we feel really good about our chances, because the field was in good shape. The Cowboys, everybody agreed, had more team speed than the Packers, and that was kind of personified by Bob Hayes, who was at that time considered the fastest man alive. And, the Cowboys were looking forward to some payback from the previous year. They thought they should have beaten Green Bay a year earlier. Now they were ready to prove that, in their minds, that they were, the better team, that it was their time now, and the Packers' time had passed, and, they were going to take the field the following Sunday and, show the world that they were the best team in pro football.
Was it ever seriously considered that they'd postpone the game?
No, because for one reason, Pete Rozelle, the commissioner of the NFL, was actually in Oakland that day for the AFL championship game. He was not in Green Bay. The leagues had merged, and Pete, to show solidarity with the AFL, was at the Coliseum in Oakland for the AFL title game between the Raiders and the Houston Oilers. So he was not in Green Bay. Now, even if he had been, I don't think it would have been postponed, because he had, his lieutenants were certainly in Green Bay, and they called Pete and said, look, this is the situation here in Green Bay. Do we want to postpone? And, all stories are that Pete, weighed the conditions and everything and said, no, play the game. And, it was kind of like the show must go on. And you have to remember that Pete also made the call on playing the weekend of JFK's assassination, which he later regretted. He later regretted that, but again, it was kind of the mindset of the NFL that, like I said, it's showbiz. The show must go on.
Good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah, good point. So in the early portion of the game, it was all Packers.
Mm-hmm.
How were they able to dominate the Doomsday defense during their first two drives?
I've spoken to so many of the players who played in that game on both sides, and the mentality of the Packers was that, okay, we've been through this before. We've played in bad weather. We've played in cold, and, we're just going to go out and play our game, and we're not going to worry about it. Certainly it was on their minds. They couldn't ignore it, but they weren't going to let it dominate their thinking. The Cowboys, on the other hand, and they've admitted this to me in their stories, that they did allow it to kind of dominate their minds through much of the first, say, quarter and a half. That's all they could think about was the weather. I mean, Bob Hayes ran pass routes with his hands tucked in his pants, because, that's all he was thinking about was the cold weather. And,
it's hard to catch when your hands are in your pants.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, the Packers picked up on that pretty quickly. They knew that if he was running around with his hands in his pants, the ball wasn't coming to him. But if he kept his hands out of his pants, well, then he was targeted for that play. So then, they would switch their defense accordingly. But, so, the Cowboys being from the Southwest, were not as used to playing in conditions like that as Green Bay. Now, certainly those conditions were out of the norm even for the Packers. But a lot of the Packers told me that the conditions they had played in 5 years earlier in the 1962 NFL title game in Yankee Stadium against the Giants was colder, and the weather was worse because there were like 40-mile-hour winds that plummeted the temperature well below zero. Nobody really had a count for how cold it got, but the field was rock hard, harder than it was at the Ice Bowl, and the playing conditions, according to a lot of the Packers, was worse in 62 than it was in 67.
I'm glad you brought up the field because I'm really curious about this. What was harder for those players, playing in subarctic conditions or the fact that Lambeau Field turned into, in essence, a slab of concrete?
Yeah, I think probably both. I think one of the things I remember Chuck Mercine telling me that the field was, the field flash froze. Lombardi's system worked. Let's begin by saying that. Okay, Lombardi had the underground cables, the heating cables, put in prior to the 67 season for conditions such as this. Now, no one could foresee that kind of Arctic cold like you mentioned. So when they took the tarp off, the moisture from the heating grid flash froze the field. So it became like a skating rink. And like you said, as hard as concrete. Now, on top of that, Chuck Mercine told me that the field, as the players were playing on it, the cleats would break the ice, and the ice would turn into like what he compared to like shards of broken glass. So it's basically like playing on a concrete lot, filled with broken glass, like from shattered bottles or something. And Chuck said that when they fell on it, when they were tackled or blocked and fell on it was like ripping their jerseys and their exposed skin. But they weren't bleeding because the weather was so cold that it prevented them from bleeding. They didn't start bleeding until they got back into the locker room after the game. And they were back in like heated conditions, and then the blood started to flow again.
That's incredible.
It is incredible, yeah. But the Arctic cold and the icy, rock hard playing field really combined to make it kind of a surreal environment that they were dealing with.
Look, I'll tell you, I'm from New York, okay, born and raised on Long Island. I know what cold feels like. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I'm not out there in the elements without much protection for 3.5 hours getting body slammed by 300-pound men. So, I mean, it was absolutely superhuman what these players were able to do. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, yeah. And I think that speaks to the testament of the, how talented these two teams were, that they could actually put up, points like they did and play the caliber of game that they did, because there were very few turnovers. Off the top of my head, I remember Willie Wood fumbled the punt. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, that led to a touchdown. Yeah, and Starr fumbled once, and that led to a touchdown as well.
Yeah,
so that was 14 points. Yeah, that the Packers gave to the Cowboys on turnovers. I don't recall, again, off the top of my head, I don't recall Meredith being intercepted or the Cowboys fumbling the ball away. Now, I'm sure they fumbled, but I don't recall off the top of my head if the Packers recovered. But, generally speaking, there were very few turnovers for that kind of conditions,
Right.
So, and again, that speaks to the coaching, and that speaks to the caliber of the players themselves.
The only comp that I have is sitting at Citi Field in 2018 to watch the Rangers play the Sabres, and it was absolutely freezing. I mean, I'm telling you, I was bundled up with about 10 layers of clothing. I could barely move. I don't know how I was able to drive the car that day. The tomatoes on the salad bar were actually frozen solid. Those tomatoes could have doubled as hockey pucks. I'm telling you. What's the coldest you've ever been, Ed? Have you ever sat out for an outdoor sporting event in the freezing cold?
Yes, yeah. We had a state championship game here, the high school football state championship game. in Hershey Park Stadium. This is back in '01, I believe it was. And
this is Pennsylvania,
snowed,
right?
Yes, in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And it snowed throughout the game. I mean, heavy snow. And they had the plows come out, between quarters and all that. So that was basically like PA's version of the snowball. And the amazing thing is that game went into double overtime. And now, again, these are high school kids. There was not a single turnover in that entire game, which
That's
is pretty
incredible.
amazing. Yeah, for high school kids, it was an incredible game.
Talking to Ed Gruver, the author of the Ice Bowl. So you brought it up a little earlier. I'd like you to go a little more in depth on it. What did George Andre and Willie Towns do right on the Cowboys' second quarter touchdown?
Well, they sacked Starr and punched the ball loose from Bart, and I believe it was Andre who scooped it up and ran it in. If memory serves, I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, it was Andre.
Yeah, Andre scooped up, ran in for a touchdown, and I remember Jerry Kramer saying that he had this insane thought that for 1 second he was going to spike Andre as he was going into the end zone, but he quickly let that pass, and yeah. So Andre went in kind of unimpeded, but yeah. So that was the Starr fumble and the Wood fumble were kind of surprising because they were two stalwarts of the Packers championship years. They were both very steady players, rarely made mistakes. Were two cornerstones of the success of the Green Bay dynasty, and then here you have, each one with a really costly turnover because by all rights the Packers should have gone into the halftime leading 14-0,
Right.
And instead it was 14-10, and then the Cowboys come out in the second half and at the start of the fourth quarter burned the Packers with, ironically, what was a Lombardi staple play, the halfback option.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny. The '87 AFC Championship game was Browns-Broncos, and
Right.
Ernest Biner was a big part of the Browns that year. They don't get there without Biner. Then
Correct.
what happens at the end of the game? Biner fumbles the ball away. Broncos end up winning. The fact that Starr and Wood did what they did in the second quarter should remind Browns fans a lot of Ernest Biner. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. To a point, and the thing I remember about Biner is not only did he have a big season, like you said, he had a huge championship game, from what I recall. I mean, he was tearing up.
Really good in that game.
He was tearing up the Broncos.
Yeah. 15 carries
half.
for 67 yards and a touchdown, and 7 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, he was really pivotal in the Cleveland comeback, and it was, kind of sad for him that, he would fumble because he looked like he was going in for the tying touchdown.
Yeah.
He was only a couple yards away from the end zone and, lost the ball, and, that was kind of it for Cleveland. But, the comparison is there. Starr and Wood, of course, are Hall of Famers.
Right, and Biner isn't, but Biner was a good player. Yeah,
very good player. Yeah, and Biner went on to help the Redskins win a Super Bowl as well in '91.
Yeah, with Mark Griffin.
Yeah, with when they beat Buffalo, and not to lay too much blame at the feet of Starr and Wood. Starr, like I said, was being sacked and had the ball punched loose. That can happen to anyone, and Wood, tried to field a punt. Then again, they're not wearing gloves or anything, so his hands are probably frozen. And he dropped the ball, and the Cowboys recovered. So, under those conditions, hard to lay too much blame on Starr and Wood. I don't think any of the players or coaches said anything to them about it. There was no finger pointing, of course, or anything like that. Those two guys were kind of above reproach. They were held in extremely high esteem by their teammates and coaches. Right,
absolutely. No question about that. So, like you said, the Packers went into the locker room 14-10 and got to warm up a little bit, but it was back to the tundra for the second half of the game. How would you describe the third quarter?
Well, I remember it was scoreless. There was some back and forth. I think it was basically a stalemate from what I recall. Neither team scored, of course, but it was just kind of an intense physical struggle. I think both teams had settled into the game. By that point, I think both the Cowboys as well as the Packers had put the elements as much out of their minds as you possibly could under those kind of extreme conditions. And they were just back to playing football. Now the elements continued to play a part. When you watch the films of the game or listen to the broadcast, all you hear or see is players, slipping, sliding, falling. Meredith tries to drop back. He falls. He slips and falls down. Travis Williams tries to run a sweep. He slips and falls down. Receivers are falling all over the place. It really became advantageous for the defense at that point because it was tough for the offensive players to make any real cuts or try to gain any real ground at that point. And I know that I remember the Cowboys offensive players saying that Meredith's mouth was freezing up and he'd get into the huddle and try to call a play and they'd be like, "What? What'd you say?" He couldn't enunciate words because his mouth was frozen.
His teeth were clattering together.
Yeah, for sure.
Was it worse in the first half? Was it worse in the second half? Was it the same? How about that? Let me hear.
From what the players told me, it was worse in the second half because the first half, at least, he had some sunshine. Now, for whatever that was worth, at least it was sunny out. By the second half, the sun is starting to descend, and the temperatures continue to drop. Now, I've heard from people who were at the game that by game's end, or at least by the fourth quarter, temperatures had plummeted with the wind chill to somewhere in the neighborhood of minus 50. Now, that's incredible conditions when you think about that. Minus 50 degrees.
I think it was warmer in Antarctica that day.
I think it was, yeah. They could have played that game there and felt it was an improvement, I think. But yeah, it was. I think it was definitely worse in the second half because of the loss of the sunshine as it was starting to set, and also because of the field conditions getting worse because of what I had mentioned before with the field, the ice being broken up by the players' cleats, and leading to these shards of ice that resembled broken glass that these players were falling on. And the field continued to freeze, so that was another problem. It was just getting worse. Conditions were worsening as the game wore on. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Okay. All right. So I feel like I'm picking on Willie Wood here. I mean, he's one of the greatest safeties in NFL history. Mm-hmm. Hall of Famer, died last year. May he rest in peace. But he did not have a good ice bowl. And in all fairness, he just didn't. Can you lay out the miscues by Wood and Bob Jeter that resulted in the Cowboys' last touchdown?
Yeah, there was some confusion. I talked to Bob Jeter about that, and he said that there was confusion in the Green Bay huddle about who – not so much in the Green Bay huddle, I'm sorry, in the Green Bay secondary about who was supposed to cover Renzel on the halfback option. Now, you figure if that's Lombardi's pet play on offense, and it had been for years, so that and the sweep, you would think that the Packers, above all teams, would be like,
here's how you stop it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they would know exactly how to stop it. But there was a miscue. It can sometimes happen in any game between any two players. And, Jeter thought Wood was going to take it. Wood thought Jeter was going to take it. And as a consequence, neither one took it. And you see Renzel, sprinting down the sideline with the ball. And all of a sudden the Cowboys have the lead. And now the Packers, for the first time all day, are going to have to, are in comeback mode. They've got to fight their way back.
And they certainly did. One of the greatest drives in NFL history, if not the greatest. Of course, we're talking to Ed Gruver, the author of The Ice Bowl. What happened on the Packers' last drive?
Yeah, I think it's with all due respect to other drives, the drive led by Elway and the touchdown drives by Montana and Brady in big games, all due respect to them, none of them did it under the conditions that Starr had to do it.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. And, I talked with Danny Reeves about this not too long ago, just during the summer. I was talking to him And he said that it was just amazing. When he goes back and looks back at that game, and now he was the coach of Elway when Elway did the drive against the Browns in '86. And
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and of course he was, the Cowboys halfback in '67. But he says when he looks back at what Starr did on that drive, and under those conditions, the almost unbelievable weather conditions, and against a Dallas Doomsday defense, that was as good as basically anyone around at that time. It's just amazing. Reeves said that Bart could do that, could engineer that kind of march under those kind of conditions and against that kind of defense. But, all the players remembered, they told me that when Bart, got in the huddle to start that drive, I believe it was at the Green Bay 32-yard line with just around 4 or 5 minutes left, he got in the huddle and was very calm and said, we're going to do this. We're going to go down the field. We're going to score, and we're going to win this game. And he set the tone right from the start with that verbal statement, and the players believed him. And, to them, he was like the ultimate leader. And so they had complete confidence that, whatever plays he was going to call were going to work.
And there's one fateful play that everyone remembers from that drive, a play that, technically speaking, wasn't in the Packers playbook. He just made it up himself, did Bart Starr. What can you tell us about what happened on that last play that the Packers ran?
The quarterback sneak?
Quarterback sneak.
Yeah.
Round right 31 wedge.
Yep. Well, and interestingly, that play was set up by a give play that the Packers ran, that Chuck Mercine ran into the hole. It was a fake sweep. Lilly followed the pulling guards, and Mercine ran to the hole vacated by Lilly and got it down to like the 3 or 2 yard line. It was very, very nearly scored a touchdown on that play. So that set up the climactic play by Starr, although Anderson had twice tried to score from the 2 and the 1 yard line and had been stopped both times. Although it looked like he had scored on the one play, but the officials ruled him down at the one. So, the Packers were not known for running quarterback sneaks. Starr had run them very infrequently in his career leading up to that point. And I think the last one he had run, if I recall correctly, was against San Francisco in Green Bay at Lambeau, and he had been stopped short of the goal line. So that was not like a primary play. But, Starr, they called the timeout. Starr went to the sideline and told Lombardi, look, our backs can't get to the hole quick enough because of the ice, because of the field. He's there. I'm close to the line of scrimmage. I don't need to run up to the line. I can just take the snap and, follow Jerry into the end zone. Because the Packers defense study had noticed, and it was Kramer who had noticed it, that of all the Cowboy linemen, Jethro Pugh was the one who would rise up a little bit out of his stance on the goal line plays. And so the Packers decided that if they're going to run a goal line play, it was going to be against Jethro Pugh, because he was tall and he was rangy, and he would come off the snap a little bit high, and the Packers felt, and it was Kramer's man, Kramer felt that he could hit Pugh, enough and drive him back. So if they needed the 1 or 2 yards on a critical play, they would do it by running at Jethro Pugh. So that was basically the groundwork for the Starr's reason for calling the play and going behind Jerry Kramer. And, he explained this to Lombardi on the sidelines, and Lombardi's response, Starr said to me, was, okay, let's run it and get the hell out of here.
I think he spoke for everyone who was at that game.
Mm-hmm. They all had the same feeling, yeah.
And what a great job by NFL Films. The perfect angle to film that block by Jerry Kramer and Ken Bowman, too. Just the perfect angle. How did they know that was coming?
Well, the CBS angle, from what Tom Brook, I spoke to Tom Brookshire. He was at that game. And he said that the cables froze in place, that CBS cameras were going to focus on something else, In fact, they're going to focus on, I think it was Boyd Dowler was flanked out to the right. So they were going to focus on him, but they couldn't move their cameras because the cables had frozen in place. So they had to stay put behind the Dallas defensive line, and that turned out to be the perfect angle from where Starr was going to run the play. But yeah, as far as NFL films go, they have their cameras spread out, throughout the stadium, so they get multiple shots of every play. But it was a great job by both CBS and by NFL Films to get that, that iconic touchdown and get the, the great footage that exists of it. Although the actual CBS footage, of course, has been lost. That game is not, the actual broadcast of the game, at least the televised broadcast, does not exist. The radio broadcast exists, but not the televised version.
You got to wonder why they taped over that. Tape over literally anything else. Don't tape over the freaking Ice Bowl. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. And think of how many games have been lost to that, the first Super Bowl, although that is said to exist, but the NFL won't pay the gentleman who owns it. And he was only asking for like $100,000. And the NFL said, no, we're not going to pay it. But we're not going to let you distribute it either. So it's sitting in this gentleman's home.
He shows it to people he really likes.
I guess, yeah, yeah. But he recorded it. It's like 95% of the game. There are a couple plays missing here and there, but he's got the actual broadcast of Super Bowl I, but it's not allowed to be shown anywhere. I mean, if I'm the NFL, I pay the $100,000, which is like pocket change for them, and then put it on DVD and sell it. I mean, they could make their money back in like 2 days.
I'd buy it.
Buy a copy. Yeah, for sure. They could price it at like, any $29, $39, $49. People would put down a chunk of change for that. Yeah, for sure.
I'd pay that 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ed, I'll get you out on this. There are a million interesting anecdotes showing how cold it actually was that day. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, boy, that's a good question.
See, I did my homework.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to say a crowd shot where they show the crowd and all you see, like the faces and everything, the clothes, everything just seemed like obscured by the clouds of steam coming out from people's breath, where it just seemed like somebody compared it to like a multi-headed dragon, where it's just like all you see are steam coming out from the crowd. And I remember the Cowboys telling me that the entire stadium that day smelled like peppermint schnapps because all the fans had the peppermint schnapps in these flasks, and they were drinking it to try to keep warm.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, some of the Cowboys said they felt like going up, looking back to the stand and saying, hey, do you mind sharing some of that? Let me have some of that,
I don't know if they'd be willing to share with the Cowboys, but...
No, they wouldn't have shared with the Cowboys, but yeah, there's a mindset of anything to try and keep warm.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I have a couple anecdotes that I find funny, if I may share them.
Sure.
The first one is the referee, Norm Schachter, tried to blow his whistle to start play, and when he tried to remove the whistle from his lips, some of his skin ripped off, and his lips began to bleed. So that game was actually the only game in NFL history to be played without a whistle.
Yep.
My second favorite one is when Frank Gifford said, I'm going to take a bite of my coffee instead of taking a sip. Aren't those funny?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and it illustrates just how cold it was. Yeah, and the players would yell, or the officials would yell, keep off him, or the play's over, because they couldn't, like you said, they couldn't blow the whistle.
It is pretty interesting that a whistle can freeze. Like, you don't think about it, but anything metal can freeze.
Yeah, and the other thing was that even the officials started to get, by late in the game, their mouths were freezing up, just like Meredith, so they had to say everything twice. So there was a play late in the game where the officials called a TV timeout, and Bob Skoronski, who was the Packers' offensive captain, he was their left tackle, ran up to one of the officials and said, damn it, you killed our drive. Why'd you call that timeout? And Norm Schachter, thinking pretty quickly on his feet, yelled back, it was for the players' pension fund. And Skoronski said, oh, great call, great call.
Yeah, because they had to get in an extra commercial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, Ed. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you.
All right, that was
Yep.
Ed Gruver. His book is The Ice Bowl. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. You'll get a New York Islanders show tonight. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.